My name is Sarah Burns. Doing a project for nonverbal communication. That means that, like, I'm acting weird, isn't that? That's weird, isn't it? So nonverbal communication means I make great eye contact with you. So if I was to be monotone or keep talking the way I was talking, that would be kind of weird. And how did you feel, Clay, whenever I talked to you like that?
Well, first off, I feel kind of weird that you called me Clay.
Oh, yeah, that could be weird, Dad.
But I thought you were looking at your computer or looking at the ground. I didn't know what you were doing. I thought maybe you were shy or afraid.
Right. So how did that make you feel?
Awkward.
So yeah. So whenever you're having an in-depth conversation with someone and they're not really looking at you, or you're trying to be serious with them and they're looking at their phone the whole time, you don't really feel connected with them. So that's what nonverbal communication is all about, because if you don't have the nonverbal part of communication down, then your real communication isn't even going to matter. So why is it so important? We've already kind of touched on it, that nonverbal communication allows us to connect, and by either looking down or not necessarily paying attention, or even like enunciating my words differently, that can come off kind of awkward or weird or make you feel not connected, stuff like that. So I'm going to actually tell you a story about a woman whose name's Carolyn Johnstone, and she was a cancer survivor, and she shared her story with nonverbal communication. She wrote in her article, "It's What Isn't Said," and it can be found in the Canadian Medical Association Journal. She opens up her story in the pink room with her doctor telling her she's been diagnosed with inflammatory lung cancer. And that was all pretty much what she heard, is that she's pretty much in her mind, she's thinking she's going to die. The whole time the doctor's telling her, he's sitting in front of her and he's like, "I hate to tell you this, but you've been diagnosed with this cancer, and it's pretty hard to treat." And pretty much she doesn't even hear anything he says after that, because the man wouldn't even look at her. So she goes on to say in her story that she ran out of the doctor's office, the nurse is grabbing her arm to stay and work something out, and she's just done because she feels so disconnected and alone, and she goes home and calls her family about the situation. But the biggest issue here was that she didn't feel that connection. She didn't feel a part of what was going on. And that's where nonverbal communication is so important, whether it's in a business field, in personal relationships, or an everyday conversation at work. If we don't express the nonverbal communication, connecting with one another, we're not going to be connected, and nothing's going to matter with what we say. We kind of already hadn't touched on this, but have you guys ever had a moment where maybe one of your daughters was on their phone while you were trying to talk to them, or you were on the phone with someone but they kind of sounded distant, or they were talking in the background, and you tried talking with them but they didn't really seem interested, so you're just kind of like, "Okay, well, I'm going to go now, I'll talk to you later," and you kind of want to shut off the conversation because they didn't seem to care. Well, that's why it's so important, because just like in her story, if it doesn't feel like they care, they're not going to want to care either. And so actions speak louder than words. And so whenever you're at church, or if you're listening to someone who wants you to buy something while you're at the mall, it's always important that they get your attention right away, that they're not monotone. It's always, I know for me personally, if one of my teachers is monotone in class, I have the worst time trying to listen to them. I end up falling asleep, or don't even retain the information that they're trying to get me to learn. So let's go back to the story of the young woman. Eventually, after time had passed and she finally came to terms that she had to treat this cancer, she went to multiple doctors. And coming after that first doctor, not even looking her in the eyes, she then went to the next doctor, who met her with a bright smile, made eye contact with her, and she felt very connected to the doctor and felt safer with that doctor because they made the chance to connect with her. One of my favorite parts of the story was at the very end of her paper article. She wrote that she was on the operating table, and it was probably one of the most hardest parts of her life because she just was weak. She was tired. She was ready to give up, and a surgeon came, or one of the doctors came up behind her and took off her head garment, which revealed her bald head. And to her, she was just mortified because she hadn't even accepted that she was losing this battle. And the surgeon that was going to be performing her surgery came back, put the cap back on, and held her hand and just waited with her before she went to sleep for the surgery. And she noted that was probably the most important times that she felt cared during this whole time, because where the other one made her feel like just a piece of material getting ready to be prepped for an autopsy where she felt dead, this doctor brought some life back into her by connecting with her with not even saying much, but just doing a simple act of kindness through nonverbal communication. So when we speak, we have something important to say. But if we don't do the little things, the nonverbal communication, it's like almost being in a relationship. If you don't look at someone while you tell them I love you, or if you have something important to say but you don't make it feel important to them, it's not going to feel important to them. So nonverbal communication can be challenging and uncomfortable at times. And I know the first time that I was addressed to not making good eye contact, or not making good cues that I was connecting with the people I was talking with, it automatically opened my eyes that I wasn't doing that. And so maybe you guys are already getting sense of, oh, I noticed that I talk on the phone while I'm distracted, or I know people who do that to me, or vice versa, that someone's talking to you and you're sending a text, or they're sending a text and you're trying to talk to them. So there's constantly, we're in a world of technology, we're in a world that doesn't necessarily feel connected because of the technology and distractions in the world. But there's a couple of reasons why that there's challenges with connecting with one another with nonverbal cues. So there was a business article that was mentioned in the European Scientific Journal called The Specific Role of Nonverbal Communication in Business. And they discussed the different reasons why this generation and last generation, generations before, have such a hard time connecting with one another, is because there's so many different tangents of nonverbal communication that affect how we communicate with one another. For instance, there's comfort norms that we see with our families or close friends. Sometimes you might see close friends hug too much, and to other people that might come off as, well, there might be something going on there because they're hugging way too much. But really, they could be just good friends, or there's a funny saying that they say to one another in passing, but to someone else that could be really offensive. So there's those different norms there that are between close family or friends. There's generational norms that are big ones. In businesses today, we see CEOs that are older and younger employees are there, and they use tablets and devices to take notes, but to them, they're taking great care to make sure that they note very well what's going on. But to a director that is speaking and is older, they might see that as offensive, because instead of making that eye contact or even focusing their full attention on them instead of looking down at the device, that comes off as a nonverbal cue to them that, oh, this person doesn't care, they're not listening to me. So whether you're speaking or listening, that's a big cue for you to listen to. There's even a cultural difference that we see from culture to culture, and this was especially important for this group because with the different business partners they use, they might have different cultures that may have different opinions on something, on how a handshake is always important, or a hug or a kiss on the cheek or something like that is seen as a sign of mutual respect. But to other cultures, that might be something that's uncomfortable or not normal for them. And one thing I think about is Jesus and his communication. We can look at the New Testament and see that he must have been tremendous at this gift, because if Jesus didn't connect with the people he spoke with, he wouldn't have had the crowds of multitudes. He wouldn't have had crowds following him wherever he went, listening to him while he's on a boat or on a mountain. And he was able to bring in people in to listen to whatever he had to say. So one story I thought of whenever he was breaking the cultural norms and making sure that they felt comforted while he was talking to them was when he was talking with the Samaritan woman at the well. It wasn't normal at all for Jews to even socialize with these women, or women or men of the Samaritans. Their culture was completely different. They would almost like stay on the other side of the street. They didn't want to even socialize or look at one another. At least the Jews towards the Samaritans. And so in Luke, or I think it's John, John chapter 6, no, John 4. In John 4, he says, it says, Jesus, tired from the long walk, sat wearily beside the well at noontime. Soon a Samaritan woman came to draw water, and Jesus said to her, please give me a drink. And he was alone, but because his disciples had gone to the village to buy some food, the woman was surprised because he had actually spoken to her. She said to Jesus, you are a Jew, and I am a Samaritan woman. So Jesus, who isn't even supposed to even socialize with these women, saw this woman come up to a well, and he's like, can I have a drink? Not only did he must have looked at her, he probably turned towards her, and this was something that wasn't even received or something that the Jews would even do of their day. So it was very important that he himself put himself on the Samaritans' level to socialize with them, and this story changed this woman's life. She went into the whole town telling everyone what Jesus had done and how he shared with her that he is the well of life that will give her ultimate thirst, that she will never be thirsty again because of what he can do for her. So Jesus was relational not only to his culture but to other cultures in his nonverbal communication. So we all can work on nonverbal communication, whether that's making an extra effort to put your phone face down or turning it off whenever you're talking to someone, or taking the time to actually look at them when you're talking to them, or giving a hug or embrace or shaking a hand. Even our body language, if someone's talking to you like this and they're like, yeah, that's nice, and not really engaging, you can tell. So we can all take part in trying to better ourselves and how we posture ourselves, how we look at people, how our faces look, just different things like that. So if what we have to say is more important, we have to make them feel important as well. So it may not be a natural feeling at first, but I would like to encourage everyone to try to their best to make nonverbal communication a very important part of communication.